And so it's a real privilege to be here in Memphis, especially on MLK weekend. So with that being said, this morning I date a physicist, and so this morning I thought I'd share a little physicist theory with you. There's this idea of the multiverse. How many of you have ever heard of the multiverse? Okay, a couple people. You might know where I'm headed. And so this theory about the multiverse says that for every action we don't make, that action happens in another universe. That there's an infinite number of possibilities of things that could happen, and that they do happen in different worlds. So the things that I do or don't do in this world are happening right now in other worlds. And those consequences of those actions are creating different versions of me. The different choices that I make in different worlds create a different person that is me, but is different. And so as I was on the plane here, this might be confusing you a bit, it confused me, but as I was on the plane here, I was watching this really great TV show called The Man in the High Castle. How many of you have ever heard of that? Okay, a couple. It's really great on Amazon, but they're not paying me to promote them, so I won't talk about them too much. But on this TV show, they just finished the final season, and I was so moved by it on the plane. And it got me thinking about this idea of the multiverse. And so in this TV show, this alternate universe that exists, that's the main storyline, is a universe in which the Nazis won the war. So in this universe, choices were made that led the Nazis to win the war. And so they colonize America. And so it's the Nazi American Reich. And in this world, in this alternate universe, which is happening at the same time that the Allies won the war in another universe, in this universe, the children are growing up with concentration camps. And the children know that this is the place where people who aren't like them go, because those people are wrong. And so in this other universe, the children that are white and don't have defects are raised believing that they are born superior. And that's perfectly normal in this other universe. In this universe, the Nazis continue to exterminate Jewish people, and they round up the people of color, and they round up gay people, and they're exterminating them in these camps. But the children believe this is normal because it's what they've grown up with. But there are a couple people who are able to travel between the universes, who have gone to this other universe, the one where the Allies won the war, one which is like ours, but different. And this one strong woman, Juliana, goes to this other universe, and she witnesses a world which is different. She sees more. She sees the same time period, but she sees different circumstances, what could have happened if other choices were made. And so she sees this other world, and she comes back to her own world, having been witness to a different reality. And she comes back and she meets this man named John Smith. And John Smith is, the guy that I kind of picture in the South. The American dream, had a white picket fence and had a great family, and he was a soldier in the war. But when the Nazis won the war, his family was hungry, and so he did what he thought he had to do to feed them. And so he enlisted to be part of the Nazi party, to be in their army. And so the years go on, and John Smith progresses through their ranks, again, just doing what he thought had to be done to save his family. And so the years progress, and he becomes the Reich Marshal, the leader of the Nazi party in the U.S., the most powerful man here, just doing what he thought he had to do to keep his family safe. But he meets Juliana, and she tells him of a world that is different. And he's enticed. And so he gathers all of these scientists, and he asks them to build a portal. And so they have this portal that goes to the other world, and Juliana brings him a film from that world. And it's a film that has John Smith. And it has his family. And in that film, they are happy. A couple years before he received this film, his son had a disease, and by the Nazi rules, he was labeled defective and taken away. A man who thought he was doing what had to be done, following the rules of his society, still paid a price. And so as the most powerful man, he sees this image of another world where his family was actually happy, where his family was actually safe. And so he's tormented because he lives between these two worlds, knowing that the man he's become because of the choices he made is a man he never wanted to be. And so he's tormented by the reality that he is not the man he wanted to be, and that he had the potential to be better. That in another world, his potential turned him into someone better. And so I ask you, on this Martin Luther King Jr. weekend, are we better? What is the world that we're seeing? When we look around us, do we see more? Do we see more than someone who is just different from us? What do we see? What do you see of yourself? We still have a world in which black and brown bodies are shot in parks and in their homes. A world in which our Jewish siblings are shot down in their temples and in their neighborhood stores. A world in which LGBTQ people are 4 times more likely to commit suicide because of bullying. Now, we may think we're just doing what needs to be done, that we're in a world that has taught us to think a certain way, but there are choices that each of us can make to change this world a little bit for the better. And so at the end of this series, in the last 3 minutes, I'll give you a spoiler because you might not watch it, but it's still worth seeing. At the end of this series, in the last 3 minutes, John Smith, tormented by the reality that he is not the man who he wishes he could be, who he actually could be if he made different choices. He doesn't have the will to go on or to change, and so he takes his own life, and in that moment, when he takes his own life, the second in command, also a Nazi American officer, removes his insignia, removes the swastika, and lays it on the table. And that one choice to go against the society that he served has the potential to change the world. And so we each have that choice to take those insignia which enable us, which have allowed us to inflict harm on people who are different. We have that choice today to take those insignia off, to lay them on the table, knowing full well it's not an easy choice. We don't know what happens after he does that. Maybe the military rose up. But we each have the choice to take off those badges that have enabled us to oppress people that are different. We each have the ability to see more than the world we are in. And that's exactly what we see in this reading from the Old Testament here, from 2nd Isaiah. So in 2nd Isaiah, right, I'm a Bible nerd, I love this stuff, so seminary's been a lot of fun, although a lot of classes. But in 2nd Isaiah, this anonymous author, who was not Isaiah, is writing under Isaiah's name. And so this author is writing during the Babylonian exile, a time when the Hebrew people had been exiled for decades, taken from their lands and put under occupation. They worshipped a different god. They were looked down upon. They were different. And it's in this moment, after decades and decades of occupation, that this person writing under Isaiah's name prophesies. That God speaks through this person in the midst of decades of occupation and says, I'm not done. I see more. Do you? God says it's too light a thing that you would be a light just for the Hebrew people, And now, if you're thinking about that, that's kind of silly, because it's actually not a light thing to be a light. For the Hebrew people who are making bricks for the empire, to be a light was difficult. To shed light on a different world was difficult, but God called 2nd Isaiah to a very difficult task. It wasn't just that Isaiah was supposed to prophesy to his own people. 2nd Isaiah was supposed to prophesy to the nations, it says in chapter 49. You will be a light not just to this people, but to all people. The light of my salvation shall extend to the ends of the earth. The light of a different world will shine to all people around the world. Just like in that multiverse, God was calling 2nd Isaiah to say, there is a different world. Though the world you inhabit, though the experiences you have experienced are dark, there is light, and you will experience light, and that light will be for all people. All people. All people. God called 2nd Isaiah and the Hebrew community in the 6th century BCE to see a different world, to see more. When Martin Luther King Jr. came to this city, he saw more. He saw more than just a segregated sanitation system. When Martin Luther came to this city, he saw more. When he looked at the country and the white officers that jailed him and beat him, he saw more. When he looked at us white people, he saw more. And he extended a grace that was unearned and unmerited. He extended us grace, his oppressors, a grace that we did not earn and did not deserve, but a grace which Jesus came to give. Because he believes that even we could see more. Even we could be better today than we were yesterday. He believed that each of us could see and be more than society had taught us to be. And in the city where he drew his last breath, he saw more. And our calling today in our church and in our world is to see more and to be more. And that's exactly what Jesus says to his first disciples. John the Baptist was standing outside, and Jesus was walking by. And John looked at this brown Jewish man, and he saw more. He said, this is the Son of God, the Lamb of God, this brown Jewish man that nobody wants to listen to in the temple, who the religious people have kicked out. I see more. This is the Son of God. And the first thing Jesus says to these new disciples is he invites them by saying, come and see. Come and see a world that is different from this one, but which can exist. The possibilities of that new world that I've come to proclaim are present. I want you to see them, and I want you to act on them, to make the choices to make this universe more like the one he came to proclaim. And so our calling in 2020 is to be the people who look at this world and don't just see people who are different because of their race or their economic status or their gender or their sexuality, but to see God in each of us. To see God in each of us, and to see a world which can be made realized. A world which can be made real, the kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. And so our calling as United Methodists in such a time as this, when the church is falling apart and breaking, when we are constantly telling people that they cannot be worthy of love, Our calling is to see more, to put aside our political agendas, to put aside all the teachings that we've been taught by our churches, and to say, I see more in this church, I see more in this world, and I see more in each person. We're called to see more and to be more. Amen.
Amen.